Hello and welcome to the first episode of a brand new series of How Do You Cope? I'm your host, John Robbins. This is the show where I sit down with special guests to talk about the challenges they've encountered in their lives and the coping mechanisms that have helped them find a way through. I'm really excited to be bringing this show back, and I can't wait for you to hear the brilliant conversations I've been having with some amazing people. My conversations have covered a huge range of experience, and I'm sure there are lessons, observations, and insights that will be beneficial for everyone listening or watching. Yes, that's right. You can now watch full episodes of How Do You Cope on YouTube. Just search for How Do You Cope Pod and subscribe so you never miss an episode. In the coming months, you'll be hearing from comedian Alison Spittle, Donald Trump's former communications director, Anthony Scaramucci, musician Kate Nash, and many, many more fascinating people. On to today's episode, and I'm pleased to say that my first guest of the series is presenter, producer, and author Richard Osman. From hosting quiz shows such as Pointless and House of Games, to producing hit formats like Deal or No Deal and 8 out of 10 Cats, Richard has had a hand in making some of the biggest shows on our screens. He's also seen huge success with The Rest is Entertainment, alongside Marina Hyde. Away from TV, Richard has become a hugely successful author with his Thursday Murder Club series, and the latest instalment, The Impossible Fortune, is out in paperback on the 7th of May. Richard suffers from food addiction and has done so since the age of 9. This is a condition that he manages every day of his life, and I'm interested to discuss everything from the phrase food addiction to how gender affects the way we discuss eating disorders, right up to the tools he uses every day to find a balance that works for him. As I said earlier, don't forget you can now watch every episode of How Do You Cope on YouTube, and you can, of course, listen to all the episodes wherever you get your podcasts. And whether you're watching or listening, please hit subscribe so you don't miss any future releases. To get in touch, email hello@howdoyoukopepod.com. We're also on Instagram and TikTok, so just search How Do You Cope Pod. And just to flag, this episode contains some strong language and discussions around addiction, so do listen with care. Here it is, my chat with Richard Osman. I do hope you enjoy it. I'm delighted to welcome Richard Osman to How Do You Cope? Hey Richard, how are you doing?
I'm very well. How are you, John?
I'm good, thank you. I'm really looking forward to this. And sometimes on this podcast, I have to address a slight elephant in the room early-ish, which is I'm going to be asking you about how you cope and what you're coping with. But I kind of think I need to say that you're the most successful person I know. And,
wow, and you know Ellis James.
And I know and I know Ellis, but in the sense that you seem to have a way of getting to the top of everything you do and creating very successful, well-received projects across a number of different media. And I think sometimes when there might be a natural thing with people who are as good as you and as successful as you to go, well, what do you mean, how does he cope? What do you mean? He's top of the bestseller charts, he's top of the podcast charts. He's made some of the best TV programs of the last 20 years.
Arguable.
So I wanted to start by asking if you could tell us about a complete disaster of a project.
Oh, goodness. I mean, other than virtually my entire life.
But that's not true. You're being very modest.
The worst thing I ever made was a show called 24-Hour Quiz, which was going to be an enormous hit because I was really annoyed that I hadn't come up with Weakest Link. So Weakest Link was a really, really good format. I'd come up with that idea of voting people out for Survivor. So it's this voting off mechanic. And I loved quizzes, but I didn't come up with the Weakest Link. So I thought, right, I'll show them. And we were making Big Brother at the time at Endemol. So I thought, well, why don't we do like Big Brother meets Weakest Link, like a quiz, but where everyone stays in the same house. This is going to be amazing. It's like, those are two of the biggest shows in the world. So put them together. Oh my goodness, can you imagine? We're going to have to move planets. And it didn't really move the dial, I would say. Lovely Sean Williamson, Barry from EastEnders, who's one of my favourite people in the world, was the host. It was on ITV. I think it was on ITV, sort of every day at about 5 o'clock, something like that. And the audience remained unmoved, and rightly so. And I've had a number of those. I mean, we could do a whole podcast about that.
Well, is your career a bit like Roger Federer in the
very similar? Very similar.
People forget that he's only won about, 52% of the, or 48% of the points he's ever played.
Well, TV is even if you have success 11% of the time in television, you're way ahead of everyone's game, because so few things are successful, so few things really hit. And when they do hit, it's huge, and so you keep throwing money after these things. But yeah, if you have let's say a 1 in 8 hit rate, then you'll stay at the top of your game.
Okay, I'm just going to write that down.
Yeah, so much worse than Roger Federer. If you were a tennis player and you won 12.5% of your games,
that's no good.
You'd be going home fairly soon.
So I've recently started doing interviews to promote a book I've written about my life called Thirst. And in the book, I share quite a lot of personal stories. But in the interviews I'm doing, I'm having to learn that just because I've written or spoken openly about some things doesn't mean I have to be honest or answer every question that's put to me.
Whatever you're comfortable with, right?
Yeah, but I didn't think that was the deal. I kind of thought, because I've mentioned this person, I need to then now take any question.
So when you're doing interviews about the book, they think it's absolute open season and you can talk about it, and you feel like the bargain is you have to. Yeah,
well, I think if you're ever honest, in inverted commas, about stuff, you're always telling a version of that story. Yeah. And it doesn't just mean someone then gets to raid the cupboard of your life.
Yeah, suddenly the one show are asking if you've ever done heroin.
So I'm going to ask you 2 questions that you might not want to answer, and you don't have to. But both our dads left when we were about the same age.
Yeah.
And I wondered if you had any memories or reflections on that process that you would like to share in terms of how you think that affected you at the time or affects you now.
Yeah, I think that I think it's traumatic, that's for sure. When you are, it's hard to sort of put yourself back in your 9-year-old brain, although it's very useful at times. It's a very traumatic thing because what do you know when you're 9? Very little, but you know family, and you know that there's a certainty when you go home, and that's ripped from you. So that would be a trauma for certain. I would say that I didn't deal with that trauma particularly, and this happened in the 1970s, John, which is a very different time, and it wasn't really the done thing to talk about things. And so long as I looked like I was okay, that was okay for everybody else. And so I was able to subsume it, to put it all to the back of my brain, to not deal with it in any way. And I don't know if you know the more modern thinking on that, which is that's not very healthy. But I've always had a quick brain, so I was able to find roots through this pain I was feeling and find roots through this betrayal that I felt, and show a face to the world that was comfortable and happy and secure. And bits of me were, but it catches up with you, and it probably, I don't know when it caught up with you, but I would say, in my late 20s and early 30s, I'd run out of road with this new person I'd created, this person who was able to hide from pain and run from pain and tell a different narrative. That was gone, and so I had to deal with it then, because I didn't deal with it when I was 9, because how can you deal with it when you're 9? How about you?
I agree with everything you said, and I guess I have found a way of holding a 9-year-old's experience and a 43-year-old's experience with sort of equal compassion and understanding, and been like, the 43-year-old knows certain adult facts about that process, which means that was for the best.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean the 9-year-old isn't bawling his eyes out and terrified and confused.
Because it's an enormously difficult introduction to the adult world. As is any sort of trauma, and at that age, if you lose a parent, or a parent disappears, all sorts of things that can happen. I think that the trauma is never the thing. It's the inability to deal with the trauma is always the thing, because we're all going to go through trauma.
Yeah.
I mean, newsflash: the world is a pretty brutal and random place. If you can find a way through trauma, is hard and it's horrible and it takes time and it takes a lot out of you, but you find yourself still on the same road you were before it happened. If you can't find a way of dealing with it, you veer off course. And you can't veer off course for too long before you are hopelessly lost, I don't think.
I watched the John Candy documentary, and his dad dropped dead of a heart attack when he was in his young sort of formative years. And when you see it as part of the documentary, it's just so clear that it wasn't ever spoken about.
Yeah.
And the internalization of that sadness and confusion and feeling lost, I think it definitely sent me inside myself.
How was it dealt with in your? Are you from a big family, and was it spoken of, or was it?
Yeah, it was. And my mum I think at the time was doing her counselling training, so she was very good at helping me to grieve. But I think it did just inevitably. I can only really describe it as my experience became internal, not external.
Yeah.
So from then on, I was in my head.
Yeah. And
then in future trauma, which are in no way related to that, your way of dealing with it becomes go inside.
Of course, it's we're both in the same business, and if you're able to weave a story or go off on a flight of fancy, then you would do that, because the alternative is to look reality in the face. And at 9 years old, you're not thinking that, of course, but you do create a different reality because you're able to, and it's in everyone's interest to accept that reality because it makes their lives easier, and then it becomes like a real thing. And I always think especially if you've got a fast brain, if you're Usain Bolt, you are the best runner in the world, unless you're running in the wrong direction, in which case you are the worst runner in the world.
Yeah, that's so true.
And that's if you go wrong even 1 degree off, and your brain is able to, do all sorts of things and, do loop the loops and acrobatics, you end up a very, very, very long way from home, I think.
Well, the second question I was a bit cautious of asking is, you've also had a marriage that ended, and you had children from that marriage. Did that breakup give you any new perspectives on your parents' relationship ending, and did that give you any ways of processing it differently?
No, I think that the understanding of my parents' relationship came before that breakup, and it's part of it. When you understand that you're not on train tracks in life, and actually, life is about growth, and life is about trying to be a real human being. So yeah, I think I'd worked that out, and I'd seen my dad a few times at that point, because I hadn't seen him for 15 odd years, something like that. And so I'd seen him a few times, and I've completely forgiven him. I mean, listen, he was sort of a fool in lots of ways, but who isn't? And he dealt with things in a bad way, but who doesn't? So I kind of got it. And we never built a relationship again that was of use to either of us, but that's okay too. But understanding all of those things, because no one leaves a marriage, or certainly no one leaves children without it being an enormous wrench. But having that understanding, I think, allowed me to understand a bit more about myself and what I needed to be and who I needed to be, and that I was still young, and that I was a very different human being to who I'd been even 10 years before. I'd been through the beginnings of therapy at that point, and started to understand the mistake that I had made when I was very young and where it had taken me. Started to forgive myself, started to forgive people around me, and all of that compassion leads you to do something very, very selfish.
You said you went to therapy in your 30s because you were tired of weird behaviour. Could you tell us what those weird behaviours were and sort of where you're at with them now?
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken before, and it's always an awkward thing to talk about food addiction and behaviour around food and binge eating, and not anorexia, not bulimia, because not throwing up, so just the overeating and trying to control my life through food. So I'd had that from very, very young. I mean, people will be able to do the maths and work out that, when you're 9 years old, there's very little you can control, but one of the things maybe is food. So I'd had that for as long as I could remember. It was a huge problem for me, and it was secret. It was very, very shameful. And, all the other shames about who I am sort of were channeled through that. So I understood that something was up, and food was the thing that showed me something was up. I think I'm from a generation and from a background where I wouldn't have gone to therapy unless I had a presenting issue. I think if I just felt discontented with the world, I wouldn't have gone to therapy. I'd have told myself to buck up or something stupid like that. But I think the fact that I had this very bizarre relationship with food and I couldn't do anything about it, and it was so weird, meant I had to go and see someone just to deal with that particular issue. And of course, you go in to see a therapist and you talk him through food addiction, and it's the last thing he's interested in because he knows it's a symptom of something else. He's looking into why that is your coping mechanism. But I have always tried to speak about food addiction because people don't really talk about it. I think it's embarrassing. And I know, it takes incredible bravery to talk about alcoholism, but there's still kind of a heroism about alcoholism, unjustly, and it's not helpful to anyone, but there's still that thing of, the great artist who, goes on a bender and goes out all night drinking, and no one is saying. And it's amazing that Ernest Hemingway wrote The Old Man and the Sea after a fun-sized bag of crunchies. No one is doing that. Food addiction is not cool in any way. It is it has lots of similarities with alcoholism, but it's very, very different as well. But the times I've spoken about it, I cannot tell you how many people come and speak to me on the street. Just so many people, and saying, my husband said he listened to this, and that's him, and he's always never been able to speak about it, doesn't like to talk about it. And so I think it's one of those things I find it embarrassing to talk about. I embarrass myself when I talk about it and when I think about my behavior around food. But I just want, there will be people listening to this now who feel exactly the same, and I didn't hear anyone talk about it when I was going through it. So I think sometimes it's useful to speak about it because it seems absurd and lots of people don't believe it exists, and all of that is fine. But it's been a really, really dominant theme in my life, and still is.
Let's talk about some of the barriers or discomforts to talking about it, because I don't want this to sound flippant, but I think Alan Partridge kind of looms large, because if you're a fan of Alan Partridge, there's a running story that he uses a chocolate addiction as a sort of way into the mental health landscape. So he can sort of be a part of the mental health discussion. And there's a famous scene where he's being interviewed alongside a ketamine addict and a drug addict. And he sort of tries to go toe-to-toe with her, which is very funny. Yeah. But also those scenes of Alan in the flashbacks where he's sat in his car
with the Toblerone,
eating Toblerone. If you take the laughter track out of that, it's a very few edits away from being an incredibly distressing scene.
Yeah, and by the way, to me, it is a distressing scene.
Yeah,
it genuinely speaks to me. So listen, it's funny and blah blah blah, but I'm like, yeah.
So, I mean, speak about some of the embarrassment maybe you've had. What is embarrassing about talking about it?
I mean, you know that a lot of behavior around alcoholism can be very, very damaging to other people, and it's embarrassing, and you put yourself in situations where you feel deep shame afterwards. But there's some social acceptability to it. With food, it is not as visceral as alcohol, and I wouldn't pretend it is. It's not as visceral as being a heroin addict, and I wouldn't pretend it is. However, food is a really, really tricky one. As you know, with alcohol, you can just give it up. I don't say that lightly because I know it's incredibly difficult, but you can do it, and you know the job, and you know that the thing you must do is not to have another drink. With food, you can't do it. You can't do that because we are surrounded by it. There's a multi-trillion-dollar industry that's is combining fat and sugar in certain ways to make you eat, and then there's putting 15 shops on every single high street where you can get that, and the more addictive it is, the cheaper it is. So all of that stuff is out there. You have to eat 3 meals a day. You have to have sustenance, and so
in a sense, we're all addicted to food in one way.
Well, in that if we don't eat it, we die.
Yeah.
If that's the definition of addiction, for sure. I'm not sure that is the definition.
No, I don't think it is actually. I don't think I'm right. But
how long have you been doing this?
We all have to. We all have to have a relationship with it.
We all have to have a relationship,
and we all
with food.
crave it at times.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the weird thing about it as well, is everyone understands the feeling of eating of going to a restaurant and going, oh my God, I ate too much. Oh, you know what? I shouldn't have had that last roast potato or something like that. So everyone understands it. So with food addiction, everyone's a bit like, same. I mean, God, sometimes I'll have a Kit Kat on the way home, on the bus, and I shouldn't. And you think, well, listen, come back to me when you have a Kit Kat and you've got 6 more in your bag and you go away into the bathroom and eat those when no one's looking. That's when, that's what we're talking about here. So yeah, you have to eat. And so if food does dominate your life in any way, if that is the thing you are addicted to, the route through it is very, very difficult, because you can have all sorts of rules, and you have very, very tough rules, but you break one of them, and suddenly you just do one thing, and it's so easy to slide from food addiction. And the key thing, and again, that's why I'm really, really happy talking about it, the key thing, which is similar to drug addiction, to alcoholism and so on, is the absolute driver of any addiction is the addiction itself. It's the shame you feel for being addicted. Whatever your inciting incident that means you're an addict, that's gone. The second you start in addictive behaviors, your behavior is so weird, and your behavior makes you feel so dumb, and your behavior makes you feel so ashamed of yourself as a rational human being, that becomes who you are. You start becoming ashamed of who you are because of the addiction. And once you're in that spiral, it's very difficult. So the one thing I can say, it's very easy to slip back into eating and slip back into eating. If I say eating, I mean eating badly, binge eating. But if you can really, really, really understand your relationship with the shame of the thing, there are ways of stopping the spiral. There are ways of just cutting the tail off it. And that's the key thing. You're never going to get into a situation where you eat healthily for the rest of your life and you never fall back down that rabbit hole. But if you can find a way of dealing with your shame, and everyone who eats has really incredibly deep shame around it, because it does seem so stupid and so embarrassing, and so childish. And culturally, it has there is nothing glamorous about it in any way whatsoever. If you can talk to that shame, that's the only way I think you can deal with a food addiction over a lifetime. You have to sit there and look yourself in the mirror and say, okay, it's like, there's nothing to be ashamed of here. This just happens to be the form which your addiction takes.
I'm going to put a pin there, because I really want to ask you, how do you talk to shame? Because I think that is such an interesting area. But maybe you could describe the process of a sort of a relapse or an unhealthy moment with food emotionally. Could you sort of take us through what your emotional experience of before, during, and after is?
You know what? It's interesting because it is not with alcoholism. It's a sudden fall, which is I must not drink. I just drank. With food, it's I've been really, really good. Do you know what? I think I've got a lid on this. I'm not doing too badly. I tell you what, I'll have that one food stuff that I'm not really supposed to have. That's okay. You know what? Someone's put biscuits out, so of course I've had one because I've taught myself that I'm allowed to have one. But you know what? I will have 3. I think it's okay because and then the next day something else happens. You go, I think maybe I could just have a bag of crisps. I'm not supposed to be having crisps, but I'm doing really, really well. I think I might have solved this. I think I might have sorted this out. And so actually, it's a very, very gradual fall. And I don't think it comes from it's not the kind of cliche of, oh my God, I'm having a bad day, I must have some ice cream or whatever it is. It's just a very gradual slipping of your standards, and slipping of those incredibly rigorous rules you have to put in place for yourself. So yeah, I think it's a less spectacular fall from grace than other addictions. I think it just gets at you, and however many times, how long have I had this? 45 years, something like that. And however many times you think, oh no, this time I think I can. I think actually I can probably just relax the rules a little bit, and it'll be fine. 2 weeks later, you're absolutely back where you started every time. You can't. And I've learnt it so many times. And as I say, the only thing is I can stop it a bit quicker now because I no longer beat myself up. I no longer think that I'm worthless if I do it. I kind of understand it. I get it. That's from a child. I learnt this coping mechanism. It's very difficult to forget the things that you did when you were a child. So it's always going to be there. And now I've taken away some of its power, which is to eat itself and to just spiral and doom loop down. But yeah, so that's how it happens. It's a relaxing of standards.
Is it offering Richard Osman today exactly the same emotional escape or numbing or changing how you feel as it was when you were young? And what does food offer you that other things aren't?
Yeah, it's that's the thing. Other people's addictions seem weird, right? I can drink and I have a good relationship with alcohol, and that's my drug of choice. I was talking to someone the other day. In America they do gummies for everything now. So they have kind of weed gummies, and they have melatonin gummies and all of these things. And I was saying, honestly, if somebody brought out a heroin gummy, I would get addicted to the gummies, not to the heroin. I'd be like, oh my God, I get to eat sweets. This is amazing. And the heroin would be absolutely by the by. So what does it give me? I mean, it doesn't give me anything. I mean, that it doesn't give you anything at all, but it is a part of you that is never going to go away and constantly needs a little bit of attention, and constantly wants to drag you from a state of truth and of calmness and of being. And it's the part of you that thinks you don't deserve any of those things, and that's quite a hard voice to quieten down. But yeah, it doesn't bring me anything. It brings me a moment's respite. It brings me that.
So the sensation of eating, swallowing, being full,
yes,
gives you respite from.
Yeah, I mean, being full doesn't,
right?
Because I don't have a relationship with that concept. It brings me respite from just the business of being alive, I think. Which, I mean, if we really want to get into addiction, the business of being alive is the thing that troubles us all, because none of us asked for it, and it's pretty random. And if you don't have any great spiritual beliefs, also you're like, I mean, this is weird. What's happening? And so you are constantly every day having to sort of pretend there's a reason that we're all here, and that there's a direction of travel. That we're all here to journey along, and so it gives me respite from that. I think I think I've never been desperate to really engage with life. It's just not a thing that I've ever been. That's ever sort of interested me. I've always been 1 foot in the bath, 1 foot out, and it comes from having a disrupted childhood, I think, and not becoming the person you were supposed to become. And I've become that person much later in life, but there's still a huge bit of me that's that life to me is not something that I've ever 100% participated in. And it's quite hard at this late age to suddenly do that. And food is a brilliant way of just quieting any questions I might have about that process. But I'm happy, I can talk about them when I'm not eating food. So it doesn't. The truth is, it doesn't do anything. None of these things do anything really.
That is interesting.
But you disagree.
I don't
You think it does do
I
something.
don't.
I know what
I mean,
I'm being semantic.
I can't disagree with your experience,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
in terms of like my experience of alcohol, and also, I don't have a food addiction. There are certainly times I have abused food to change how I feel.
Yeah.
And I think it definitely, as you said, gives me respite from the experience of living. I would say that that's the internal experience of living. So my thoughts.
Yeah.
So alcohol changes the nature of my thinking and my sensations of my body.
Yeah.
So it definitely was, living without that becomes about accepting that EQ of emotion and thought that you were so desperate to couldn't get through a whole day being in it.
But what I mean is, I think that does nothing for you.
Yes. Yeah. It's
empty. It's completely empty. It just feeds. I think after a while, the addiction needs you to be addicted. Not you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It has to feed, and it's a big part of you, and it has to feed in the same way that, if you haven't been down to the gym recently or something, you have to go and work out because there's a bit of you that feels like it's lacking, and occasionally your addiction is like, I just, come on, I haven't done anything bad for so long. Come on, man.
The fuck it button.
Help a brother out here. So it doesn't do anything for me. It does something for this weird vestigial part of me that happens to still live in my house.
Well, there is a saying in alcohol recovery, the man has a drink, the drink has a drink, the drink has the man.
Yeah.
And there is definitely a stage where it's almost like you're just a vessel for this addiction, which is rolling on.
I'd agree with that.
Without you really having much say in anything.
Yeah. And I honestly, and I think the key to that is that the addiction itself becomes the shame. And with that, you cannot get out of that loop. You can't get out of it. The addiction feeds itself. It's like a flame that constantly feeds other flames. And so long as you're still in that bit of an addiction, it's impossible to get out of it. And it's not dealing with the alcohol. It's not dealing with food. It's dealing with that shame, that feeling that you're not good enough, or that you're ridiculous, or that if people only knew what you did in secret, they would shun you. All of that stuff. That's the stuff. I think that if I was to say anything that's helpful to anyone who's currently going through this, that is where I would start. I wouldn't start by saying, but you understand food, you must eat properly, you must do this. This is what it's doing to your body. The same with alcohol. Yes, but you have to understand what it's doing to you and what it's doing to people around you. You have to just say, you feel terrible about yourself. You feel you're awful. You're a terrible fraud. If people really knew you, you feel like a freak. And that's the bit you have to deal with, because you're not a freak. What you're doing is a pretty rational response to the things you've been through and to the world you've been put in, I would say. Lots of other people don't do it. But by the way, lots of those people are doing stuff that you wouldn't dream of behind closed doors. And lots of those people have behaviours that might not look like their addiction because they're nothing to do with substance, but they have behavioural things they do which are absurd. Okay, and just because you've got this one that is very visible, you mustn't think that you're the weirdo, because you're not. It is rational to abuse substances in this world. And the absolute key is to recognise that it's okay. And once you do that, you can start dealing with it, I think.
So maybe you could talk to whatever extent you're happy with about the approach your therapist or therapists have taken, and maybe we can work towards how you what did you say? How do you speak to shame?
Yeah, I think addiction is a derailing of who you actually are. So, it's a trite example, but I'm 9 years old and there's pain because my dad has left me. So the path that I was on, which I find it useful to say true north, let's say. We know there's no truth, we know that, but I call it a true north. That bit where you know you're being yourself in a healthy way. You're knocked off true north at a young age. And so the key thing he taught me was that I wasn't living my true north anymore. So I remember that the very first session with him, I'd say, but I do this because of this, and I do this because of this, and I think this that is healthy actually because this helps with this, and and so that's me. And at the end, he just said, "How is that working out for you?" And you think, yeah, it's working out really, really badly because I've broken up a family. I've still got this ridiculous food behavior. So yeah, it's working, and it's really, really bad. And so just that dismantling of this insane kind of alternate reality that you built up over the years because you've become two people. Very, very hard to break it down because those two people are almost identical. They are the same person, and almost everything about former me is exactly the same as about present me. It's just a way of saying, listen, there's one thing that's keeping you down here, and that is the secrecy and embarrassment of the thing that you have in the middle of your life. And there's so much narrative around it about addiction and, substances are addictive. And of course they are. We know there's a physical addiction. We absolutely get it. And that's one of the things that addiction can feed on, the fact that it's quite hard even physically to give this stuff up. But, if you can get in contact with that version of you, I always think, here's the way my therapist taught me, and so I think about it a lot. If you're conscious within your addiction, okay, sometimes you're definitely not. Sometimes you're just drinking or you're eating or whatever it is. And there's sometimes in the middle of your addiction, the shame is there. You know it's wrong, but the addiction is more powerful than you. So the addiction is, no, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And you say, okay, in that circumstance, well, there's two voices in that conversation. I mean, one of them is more powerful, the addiction, but it's definitely talking to you. Okay, so what about this person it's talking to then? That's you. That's the real you. And once you realize that the addiction is having a conversation with you, which is saying, no, we're doing it. Come on, there's no point. Oh my God. I mean, listen, no one cares about you anyway. God, it doesn't matter. And everyone's laughing at you anyway. You think, well, sorry, who are you talking to? Who's the addiction talking to? It's talking to you. And that's the person you need to concentrate on, because that's the real you. And once you realize that, you have to take this tiny little voice to the gym, because the addiction is so powerful and strong. So years of no one's touched it. It's been the absolute king of the castle. It's like Trump. It's like, it doesn't care what you think. It can do anything. It has no limits to its power. There's no Supreme Court that can touch it. The legislature is toothless. But you got this little person here who the addiction is crowing over and is telling him is an idiot. If there's a voice telling you that you're awful and you're an idiot, then that's a conversation. So you work on one side of the conversation that's really you. That was the route through that my therapist taught me, and I found it incredibly useful. Again, a lot of the times it's unconscious. You can't help you're eating or you're drinking, but the times where you hear a conversation, try and stay in that moment. You'll lose the conversation 9 times out of 10 because it's so powerful, but at least you're in that conversation. At least you start to understand that you are still there. You as a human being are still there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpick there that I'm very interested in, because there's something I've not actually heard anyone say before, which is the potential for the shame that you feel to actually be your deadliest weapon.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that shame has sort of got your best interests at heart.
Yeah.
It's saying, hey, we're better than this.
Yeah.
And we don't have to do this. And this isn't helping you.
Well, it's hard. The shame is your best weapon because the shame is a voice.
Yeah, it's like a sort of a conscience. It's a witness to what's happening.
But who's hearing that voice?
Mm.
You're hearing that voice, and there you go. There's your starting point. It's really hard. It's really, really hard. But I found it useful, Anyone at home who's, you might have had an episode yesterday, you might be going to, you might have one this evening. If at any point you hear that incredibly familiar voice that you've heard time and time and time again, and it's the voice that won't let you live, the voice that won't let you be, the person that you want to be, just remember it's talking to someone, and have a little think about who that somebody is, because the someone it's talking to is you. And if you can just start amplifying you in those conversations, a little bit more, you find sooner rather than later, you can actually put up more of a fight.
And maybe to play around with the negative voice and put a compassionate spin on it, to say, as opposed to, you're such a failure, you always do this, you're never going to be free of this, you're pathetic, to go, hey, I think we can work together on this. I've got your back. Maybe tomorrow we look into taking some action, because what you described about the first thing you said to your therapist as being, I do this because of this is okay because of that, is that's an ego that has evolved. I don't mean an ego as in thinks they're amazing, an ego as in a version of the self that has evolved as a protection device.
But also because it's worked for you.
Yeah.
It's
sort of self-justification.
It kept me from pain for a really long time. I mean, addiction works for a reason, because it does something for you. Is actually useful. There comes a time, however, when like in any manager's career, where they've outlived their time at the club, and then it's time for regime change. But it's very, very hard to do. But I think, however you want to experience that conversation, the realization that it is a conversation and that there are two parties in that conversation, I think is useful. Useful. I think this is an absolute sidebar, but in terms of the absolute best advice I have ever, if you're writing a book, is if you're writing a book, an author has a version of that voice, which is, you are a fraud. You writing a book. Oh my God, this book is hopeless. You've read books, right? They're really good, right? And you would just go blah, 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 blah. So every writer has that voice constantly. And I really remember just one evening, I think it was my second book or something, and I was thinking, mate, this book, I was about halfway through, it's so lightweight. It's gonna fly away. There's no ballast to this book. Where's the soul of this book? It's literally so flippant. I really remember thinking at that voice, and they think, yeah, no, you're right, it's awful. And I suddenly went, no, hold on, that's just a note for tomorrow. That's literally tomorrow. You go, oh yeah, I did. Yeah, it's a bit lightweight at the moment, this draft. I need to add some ballast. Yes, that's good. And when you start reframing that critical voice when you're writing as a note for tomorrow's writing, I found that incredibly useful. So it's not, you are hopeless. It's, have you thought about the fact that this book at the moment might not be funny enough, or that this book doesn't have enough heart in it? And you do that tomorrow. I haven't ever been able to successfully really transfer that across to life, but I do try and get that negative voice and just go, oh, thank you. Yes, that is a good note for tomorrow. But it's for me, that voice is still too combative.
You said that dealing with life is hard without some kind of spirituality. But what you are describing there is very reminiscent of certain forms of Buddhism and mindfulness, which is beginning to become aware of the different versions of us that hear and speak in our heads. And, a very Buddhist question would be, well, who's noticing that?
Yeah.
Who notices the noticer?
Yes, qui notice il noticer, right? As I believe the Latins would have said. No,
you could have said anything there and said it was the Latin, and I'd have nodded my head.
My therapist says to me a lot is that you've got a very Buddhist mindset, and if I was a different sort of person, I would go and read up about Buddhism. But I'm not a different sort of person, and I've got other things I want to do than read up about Buddhism. But certainly, my relationship with what I perceive to be a void at the heart of life is important to me, and I'm very, very envious of people who do have a deep spirituality. I think the world is so absurd and the desire to, put a pattern, put any sort of pattern on it, I absolutely get. I haven't been able to, find a route through that suggests anything other than, we're a cosmic fluke. And if you do think that, and I do think that, and I absolutely respect people who don't think it, but I can't lie. That's how I perceive the world to be. We're sort of hurtling on a rock, and we're a happy or unhappy accident. I think if you do perceive life like that, a lot of the traditional ways to get yourself out of addiction are quite difficult. A power that is bigger than you, some sort of sense of, meaning, some sort of sense of making the world a better place. If you believe that there's sort of a randomness about us and the world is becoming a worse place, then it's quite hard to use those as motivations to get out of addiction. Because I
think the reason it's Buddhist is because a Buddhist may say, I'm going to sit with that void.
Yeah.
I'm not going to try and invent something to make it go away.
Yeah, you have
I'm going to accept it.
Yeah.
And they might also say, these different voices in my head, if I begin to, as long as I don't identify with them, as long as in a sense none of them are me, then that gives me freedom, like you were saying, to take criticism as a note.
Yeah.
Because there's a lack of identification with the criticism being true or you.
Yeah.
And that gives you quite a lot of ability through simply mental exercises to change your experience of the experience of being human.
Yeah, and it's listen, I don't like to think too much, and so I tend not to. I tend to think quickly, and then not at all is how I experience the world and how I think about stuff. But so you've done the 12 steps, but there's a part in that sort of it means you have to embrace some sort of spirituality, or is that fairly flexible?
Or very flexible, but I think at its heart is a form of ego death whereby anything that is more powerful than you gives you opportunity to let go of things.
Yeah.
And the language of how you do that is perhaps less important than the practice of handing things over.
How would that look to you?
So it would be a form of seeing myself as not being top of the tree.
Yeah. That's a wonderful moment in life.
Oh, so
to kind of go, oh my God, there are people out there who are so much better than me at everything that I do, and it's okay.
Yes, and also the way they speak about it in 12-step recovery is when you're in addiction or in self, and that can happen when you're not in an active addiction, it's like you're the director of the entire world. So the red light on your way to work, the train breaking down, waking up and Trump's bombed Iran, all of this stuff is happening, which is not what you want to happen.
Yeah.
Your partner calling you out on something, your kid being late home, all of these hundreds of things that happen every day, which we don't want to happen.
Yeah.
And they are big drivers of addiction. The sort of self-pity, this hasn't worked out, this hasn't worked out.
Yeah.
I just want to switch it all off. They're all mad, the lot of them. That's pitching me as the person in charge of every single element of the entire world, from the rail network to international politics to other people's reactions.
Main character energy.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
I know I've said this before on this podcast, but the piece of shit at the center of the universe.
Yes. I think on the Angela Scandon episode.
Big
That's very funny
thing for me. That.
Yeah.
So a higher power is like suddenly, oh, there's someone else is in charge of all of this.
Yeah.
So I can kind of leave it to one side. That doesn't mean I have a link to go, oh, seeing as you're in charge, can I have A, B, and C? Can I get this? It's just going, oh, it's not up to me.
Yeah, I think and that's quite an esoteric discussion. And I hope I want to pass on really concrete ways of dealing with food addiction. But one of the ways that I cope in a broader sense is around that idea of, social media is full of people who are reacting to every single thing that happens in the world, every single bad thing that happens, just reacting immediately and very viscerally. And by the way, that's absolutely their business to do so. And I tried to learn a very, very long time ago that you just can't put yourself through that every time for every single thing that happens and every wrinkle of every single thing that happens. We've evolved over thousands of years to be very respondent to danger and very respondent to threat. And that's been incredibly useful to us. And if you've only got like one news bulletin a day and then a newspaper in the morning, then actually it's still fairly useful because you can start thinking about the world and what's happening. And I wonder what's happening, over in America. If you are on a 24-hour news cycle and stuff is happening constantly, and not only is things happening, but you're reading reaction to those things happening, you're then reading reaction to that reaction, and you're seeing, if you're somebody who doesn't like conflict, for example, and I do not like conflict at all, it's just never been in my nature. If you don't like conflict, you picked a very, very, very bad 20 years to live in. Because it's nonstop. And I do sometimes think, because some people, my wife, for example, can deal with conflict. She can go, oh my God, this is happening. And then she's absolutely right as rain the next second. The cat walks in and she's like, it's the cat. I can't do it. If I let it in, it stays in for a long time. And I do sometimes think on social media that there are people who their personality type is, if I'm going to vent, and then I'm okay. And you think, okay, but there's thousands of you who are all venting, and there's thousands of people like me who have gone, oh my God, yeah, you're right. Oh yes, and it's going to stay with me for the whole day. So it might have made you feel better to vent about something and then go off about you, but it's making a huge amount of people feel absolutely lousy. So I learned a long time ago, almost everything is muted on social media, and not because I don't want to know about it, but I do want to know about the world, but I have ways and means of finding out about the world. There are still ways and means of finding out about what's going on in the world, which is not two people who you don't know and who don't know what's going on arguing with each other. And so that is a way I find of coping with the madness of feedback that we get all the time at the moment.
It's a bit like realizing everyone has a negativity footprint, like a carbon footprint.
Yeah, I think so.
And to just continue to chuck this stuff into the world, especially online, is to increase the sort of the warming of negativity.
But also, I get it, because that for some people is the way they deal with it.
Yeah,
they have to have an outburst, and then it's okay. They have to get it out of their system, and that is not a bad way to deal with it. But we just have there's a lot of them. And if you are not someone like that, then it is genuinely best to avoid it. And people sometimes say, why don't you give your opinion more on social media? And you think, well, if we really think the thing that's gone wrong in the world is there's not enough opinions, and so I try and sacrifice myself at the altar, just going, we don't all have to say everything we're thinking all the time. It's okay.
But it's also a great mantra for dealing with stuff around addiction as well, is to aiming for neutrality is actually, I've found, more beneficial than aiming for happiness.
Yeah.
Because happiness will always evade you, and it will cause disappointment, and it will make you think you're failing. So to be neutral, to actually have no opinion, to try and practice that, even if you don't actually feel that, but to practice,
you're always going to have an opinion.
Yeah, but I can fake it till I make it. But if you don't always have to give
vent to it all of the time, then it's addiction feeds off conflict. It's its favorite thing, and because conflict is my least favorite thing. Someone who likes conflict is always going to beat someone who doesn't like conflict. Yeah. Because they have more weapons at their disposal, and the person who doesn't like conflict will give in immediately, and that is addiction. My shame loves conflict, loves nothing better than trouble. Whereas me, as a human being, Richard, I don't like trouble. And so I've always got, yes, okay, yeah, okay, we'll do it. Okay, we will eat that. Yeah. So is there something in that? Never thought about it in that way before.
No, definitely. And I think, if you take the global political situation at the minute and throughout history,
that's how I try and think about it. The perspective of it.
Those who are comfortable with conflict get to the top.
Yeah.
you talked about practical solutions for people who are listening. And I wondered if you could talk us through your sort of toolkit when either you are feeling vulnerable or you're approaching an event, say, or a situation, because you can't live in a world without food. You can't live in a day without, or a morning without food. I can just about get a day without coming into contact with alcohol.
Yeah.
But I'm going to have to live in the world with alcohol.
Yeah.
But say you're approaching a party or an evening out, or I mean, TV writers' rooms are a nightmare.
Oh my God,
for just
full of snacks,
crap everywhere.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to do that if they had shitloads of booze everywhere.
Yeah.
What sort of things do you say to yourself? What sort of stuff do you have in the toolkit ready to go?
Yeah, it's really, really tricky. I think things like, as you say, writers' rooms or parties or things like that, when you're around people, are one thing. I think the secret eating is always much, much, much worse. You know, if you are somebody who is an overeater and you're in a writer's room and there's crisps and chocolate and all that stuff, you will eat all of that and probably more than anyone else in that room, but you will then, on the way home, buy more and do much. So I remember my therapist years and years and years ago, I think it must have been even my first year because it was Christmas, and he said, you know, are you going to be okay with food around Christmas? And I said, well, the thing is, like, I eat every day like it's Christmas. That's what a food addiction is, by the way. You know, at Christmas when you eat like loads too much and you eat, you know, it's like that, but every day. So I think the best coping strategy you can have is to be honest with people around you. If you're by yourself, that's a lot harder. But if you've got, you know, any friendship group you can be honest with. I have never told anybody about food addiction who has been anything other than compassionate when I said it. Most of the people I've said it to just went, well, yeah. I mean, I worked that out. But everyone is compassionate. Everybody gets it. And if you are living with people or around people or working with people who understand that you have that issue, it is a lot harder to sort of suffer it in an ambient way, because, you know, people are looking out for you, and, you know, you have other people in your army. So be honest. If you have an episode, be even more honest. You have to say to your loved one, this is what just happened. This is the thing that I did. And again, people who love you will absolutely understand that. They will feel appreciated. They will feel like, you know, you've told them something that's very important. And if someone doesn't understand, that's okay. Some people won't, but being open and honest about what it is you're doing is the best thing you can do. And after that, it is just, you will find your own discipline. You'll know your trigger foods. For me, it's not trigger events at all. I don't eat because I'm stressed. I don't eat because I've got something coming up that I'm worried about. I just eat because I wasn't eating, and then I slip, and then suddenly I'm eating again. So the key is, to have discipline around your trigger foods, to really look into your behavior and go, okay, what is it that I'm ashamed of? What is it? Is it chocolate? Is it cakes? Is it, you know, is it I'll go out to restaurants, or whatever it is? Everyone will experience in different ways. But to understand those things, to make yourself rules, understanding that, you know, you do and will break those rules, but you're going to have it forever. If you can spend most of your time not abusing food, that's the most thing that you can ask for. I think it's not like alcohol. You're not going to give food up, so you are going to eat. But if you can find rules that you can live with and live by, then that's about the best thing that you can do. But the 100% the key is to be honest with the people around you. Be honest about who you are, and then be honest when you break the rules as well. And anyone listening to this who lives with a food addict as well, it is. I know it's hard, but you've spoken on this podcast before about how ridiculous an addiction seems to someone who doesn't have that addiction, and how the solution to the addiction is so simple. Well, don't have a drink. I mean, why don't you stop after 3 drinks? You don't have a fourth one. Or, yeah, but you don't have to go to Poundland and buy all that chocolate. I mean, just don't do it. Why don't you read a book or something? It seems absurd. If someone is opening up to you, please accept that to them it is unbelievably real and it is out of their control and they need your help in getting it back in their control. It's those things really. It's compassion for yourself, compassion for other people, but it starts off with accepting it and trying to just stop that spiral of shame. That's if we take one thing away, it would be that, which is it's not crazy that you're doing this.
When I was researching this and doing lots of sort of Googling about you and listening to other podcasts you've been in, reading articles, and it was amazing the amount of quite clunky phrases that are out there to describe food addiction. So people would talk about eating behaviours or disordered eating. And I wondered if you either presented as being, very, very large or overweight, or if you were a woman, do you think we would be talking about an eating disorder?
Oh, it's definitely an eating disorder.
So why does no one use the phrase when it's in relation to a man?
Well, yes, I mean, exactly. And listen, John Prescott once came out and, admitted that he was bulimic and was sort of laughed back into the closet again because, it's, again, we can talk about the genderedness of food addiction, but, for a man, there is some sort of weird extra thing of saying, well, this is not a man's addiction. I know what a man's addiction is. And that's the addiction that Ollie Reed had. That's a man's addiction. So there is a genderedness to it. I wouldn't want to overstate that because it's eating disorders, affect so many different people. But sure, I mean, what I call an eating disorder. I mean, I mean, it is. It's certainly to do with eating, and it's disordered. The language around it is, but the language around bulimia is clunky as well. I mean, it's because food is so present that it's people, you don't even know how to, it's right in front of our faces all the time. It's quite hard to kind of take a substance, it's like having a love disorder. We need love. We need to give and receive love. Some people abuse that, but it's just an ever-present thing in our lives. So it's I don't need it to be labelled particularly because you know it when you see it.
Right.
Right.
I was just wondering if you were describing earlier about when you tell people sometimes about what happens for you, they, like you said, they go, "Oh yeah, I know what you mean. I'd ate too much last week," or if you said I had food addiction, I can understand that response. If you said I have an eating disorder, I think someone would go, "Oh, I don't have that."
Yeah. Yes. I know what you mean. That might be useful. All I can speak of is people who are listening to this who will know what I mean because they will understand it in themselves. And I'm talking about people who love me, who I have spoken to about it, and they would understand it in those terms, I think. But yeah, it's clearly an eating disorder for sure.
Well, I've not got on to how do you cope being so tall, which
Yes.
I do actually have questions
Great.
about.
Very happy.
But I
to.
don't. I mean, there's as little you can do about that as there is you can do about food being in the world. But it always struck me that you get the double take. Like people would be looking at you anyway.
Yeah, I get the treble take.
Do you get the treble take?
Yeah.
So look at that guy. He's really tall.
Yeah.
Look at that guy. It's Richard Osman.
Yeah.
What's the third take?
Oh no, I suppose that's a double take.
You get the double take and then the holy shit.
But don't forget, a double take is just one extra because you look at someone, that's the take.
Okay.
The
look again is the
double
height.
take is he's really tall.
Yeah.
The treble take is, oh my God, that's Richard Osman.
And Greg Davis gets the same.
Yeah.
And I was at a wedding with him and a line formed for photos. And it wasn't, I want a photo with Greg Davis. It was, I want a photo with the tall man.
Yeah. And people go, oh my God, I'm so small. I bet if you never had a photo taken with someone as small as me, you go, there are children in the world. It's okay. Cameras can deal with this.
But just in terms of someone who, you said earlier, likes to have one foot in the bath.
Yeah.
Maybe likes to retreat from the world every so often.
Yeah.
How do you cope with that visibility? I would feel so seen. And you are literally so seen.
Yeah, and it was it played a large part in the addiction because of course growing up I felt from sort of 16 onwards I was very, very tall and I felt awful about it. I felt I didn't like myself, didn't like how I looked, I didn't like being tall, I didn't like being the center of attention, and I've got this food behavior, so I already feel weird. And so it tied into that. And I can't see, I've got incredibly visually impaired. So I'm like, I'm not built for this world at all. I'm like so tall, it's ridiculous. And everyone stares all the time, which they do. I can't see anything. And people don't know that I eat. So the whole thing, shame will take anything you got, whatever it is, it will bring it all in. And weirdly, I think I might be one of the few people for whom fame has been quite useful because, I wouldn't be able to walk down the street without people staring at me or saying stuff. And at least now I don't just get the double take, I get the treble take. And at least people know who I am. And at least people are saying, oh, I didn't know you were that tall, or oh, you don't look that tall on TV, or anything. That for me, it's made me come to peace with it a little bit more than I had done. Because it is weird. And, anyone who has any difference about themselves will understands, microaggressions, absolutely nonstop. People very weak people cannot, if someone's different to them, a weak person has to lash out because it just makes them feel, they're constantly looking for something to feed whatever weakness they have, and someone else being different to them is incredibly useful. And so it's if you can beat this out, I've always said that my height is incredible radar, in that most people who talk to me about my height could not be nicer, but anyone in the world who is a will go, oh, mate, where are you at? And you just, oh, great. Well, at least I know now. At least you've told me exactly who you are. So in that way, it's quite, it's been quite useful. Other than I don't want to talk to those people during my teens and 20s, So I didn't like it. And now I'd rather not be this height. It'd be better not to be. But it's brought me some good things as well. I get remembered. If I want to be alpha in a room, I can be alpha. It's just, as you say, you can't hide away from it. My son is 6'6", so he's like an inch shorter than me. And I said to him when it was apparent he was getting that height, I said, look, when you walk into a room, you only have two options. Either who's that tall guy, or who's that tall guy really stooping and looking incredibly awkward. I said, those are your own. You don't have a third option, which is who's that normal height guy. I said, so you have to choose one of those two things. So you just have to own it and be that. But I've always been uncomfortable about it. And
well, that's another very Buddhist bit of advice you gave your son.
Is it?
It's called the second arrow.
Yeah, I don't follow it though.
The first arrow we have no control over.
Yeah.
The second arrow is our reaction to the first.
Okay.
Which is optional.
Oh, that's fun.
Which is a very wise piece of advice to hand on to him.
I'm beginning to like these Buddhists.
I'll introduce you to some.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Richard Osman, thank you so much for joining us here on How Do You Cope. It's been fantastic.
Absolute pleasure.
There you go. A really interesting chat with Richard Osman, and I do hope you enjoyed it. I especially enjoyed wrestling with quite a few esoteric concepts with him, and how he brought us back down to earth with some very useful advice. I was also really impressed by how he acknowledged that his embarrassment in talking so openly about food addiction came second to the importance of helping people going through similar things who may feel isolated. Richard will be joining me again on Thursday for our bonus podcast, The Gratitude List, where he'll be sharing the 5 things he's grateful for. If you'd like to get in touch with the show, send your thoughts and reflections to hello@howdoyoukopepod.com. You can also find us on Instagram and TikTok. Just search How Do You Cope Pod. Plus, don't forget, all new episodes of How Do You Cope are on YouTube, so watch and subscribe there. How Do You Cope is a significant production. See you next time.